This proposal presentation will provide an overview of the proposal or application itself. There are 5 main parts of the proposal or application: the project information page, the CDFA application intake form, the proposal application form, the performance measures, and the budget. Note that the proposal application form and budget page have significant differences between infrastructure grants and equipment-only grants, while the other 3 components are largely the same for both tracks. The first section shows information about the funding opportunity. No information is entered on this tab. The next section is the project information page. Here you will enter general information about the project. The first is the project title, which should concisely describe your project in 15 words or fewer. The project title will be the unique project identifier, so please provide a unique and descriptive title. Please avoid using acronyms here. Please do not name your project RFSI application or similar, and please do not use the organization or applicant's name as the project title. Next, enter the total amount of RFSI funds requested. As a reminder, infrastructure grants may request between $100,000 and $3 million in RFSI funds, and equipment-only grants may request between $10,000 and $100,000 in RFSI funds. Infrastructure grants should then complete the matching funds section. List the matching funds you will provide as cash match, in-kind match, or a combination thereof. As a reminder, the matching funds requirement was covered in the previous webinar and is detailed in the request for proposals or RFP. Also remember that equipment-only grants do not require matching funds. Finally, please provide contact information for the primary contact. This should be the individual who will handle the day-to-day management of the grant through the execution of a grant agreement if the project is awarded funds. The next section is the application forms, 3 forms that will need to be completed before the application can be submitted. The first form is the CDFA application intake form. On this form, you will enter information about the applicant organization. The legal name should be that of the organization that will serve as lead for the project and enter into a grant agreement with CDFA. The name should match the organization's federal tax return. Next, select the entity type that best describes the applicant organization from the drop-down menu. Briefly describe the applicant organization, the service or services it provides, and/or the organization's purpose. Next, provide the physical and, if different, mailing address for the applicant organization. Continuing with the CDFA application intake form, the California Senate and Assembly districts where the applicant organization is located are also required. Select these from the drop-down menus. Next, provide the applicant's 9-digit taxpayer identification number. If known, provide the applicant's unique entity identifier or UEI. Note that a UEI will be required prior to executing a grant agreement if a proposal is awarded funding. More information on UEIs can be found in the RFP or at sam.gov. The name and contact information for the authorized representative and a secondary or backup contact should also be entered on this form. Please ensure that the secondary contact is reachable. Finally, enter the name and contact information for the person and organization submitting the application. The submitting organization should match the name of the organization submitting the proposal application. In most cases, this is the same as the applicant organization. However, if a grant writer prepares a proposal application on behalf of an applicant, you must disclose the grant writing organization to prevent possible conflicts of interest during the review process. The proposal application form makes up the core of the application. A scoring rubric can be found in the RFP for both infrastructure grants and equipment-only grants. Infrastructure grants have 110 points possible, including points from additional considerations, also included in the scoring rubric in the RFP. Note that the performance measures and budget pages will be filled out in other areas of Amplifund. We will discuss the application form for infrastructure grants first, and then we will discuss the application form for equipment-only grants later. In the proposal application form, first provide a brief executive summary suitable for dissemination to the public. This should be 250 words or fewer and should include the name of the applicant organization, the project's purpose, deliverables, and expected outcomes, and a description of general tasks and activities to be completed during the project to fulfill these goals. Next, use the checkboxes to select one or more of the RFSI funding priorities. As a reminder, these can be viewed in the RFP. Note that the Amplifund instructions will direct you to provide an explanation. This is not required. For the Distressed Communities Index question, use the linked map to provide the Community Distress Score for the county or counties and zip code or zip codes, which will benefit from the proposed project. Also provide start and end dates for the proposed project. Note that projects can begin no earlier than October 1st, 2024, and end no later than February 26th, 2027. Continuing with the application form, use the checkboxes to select the applicable project type from the list provided. You may select one or more. Next, briefly identify the specific and existing problem, issue, or need the project will address. Again, please be specific. For project objectives, please provide a list of the objectives this project hopes to achieve. Indicate the objective number and provide a description of each objective. Project beneficiaries are sometimes a confusing part of the application. Note that the number provided should be a reasonable estimate of the number of individuals who could realistically directly benefit from the project. Note also that this benefit excludes the applicant, any contractors or cooperators, and their employees. Also, the benefit must both take place and be measured during the grant duration. In this section, identify the number of project beneficiaries and use the checkboxes to select any applicable beneficiaries from the list provided. Check all that apply. Again, the Amplifund instructions will request an explanation here. This is not required. To wrap up the application form, there are 3 more questions. Applicants must indicate if the proposed project has been submitted to another federal or state grant program for funding. If no, please write not applicable. If yes, please write the name and agreement number of each grant other than the RFSI. Also include a brief description of how the proposed RFSI project differs from or builds upon the other proposed or funded projects, as well as the tracking mechanisms in place to ensure the RFSI project does not duplicate costs or activities from any other sources of funding. Next is the external support section. Here, name the stakeholders who support the need for this project and briefly describe why they support the project. Note that members of the applicant organization, cooperators, or contractors are not considered external support. Finally, the graduated match self-certification section allows those applicants that qualify for a reduced matching funds requirement of 25% to self-certify to that effect. As a reminder, all infrastructure grant projects have a 50% matching funds requirement. However, certain applicants qualify for a reduced match of 25%. These include beginning farmers or ranchers, veteran farmers or ranchers, limited resource farmers or ranchers, socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers, historically underserved farmers or ranchers, small disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, and/or veteran-owned small businesses. If an applicant qualifies, they should select Yes from the drop-down menu, then use the checkboxes to select the appropriate category or categories and the self-certification box. The proposal application form for equipment-only grants also makes up the core of the application. Again, a scoring rubric can be found in the RFP. There are 55 points possible, including points from additional considerations, also included in the scoring rubric in the RFP. Note that the performance measures and budget pages will be filled out in other areas of Amplifund. Some parts of the application form for equipment-only grants are the same as for infrastructure grants, but some are different. We've marked the parts that are the same with an asterisk, and we will cover the differences now. We will now cover the parts of the application form for equipment-only grants that are different from those on the infrastructure grants form. For the questions that are the same descriptions apply. The first difference is the operations identifier question. Here, select one or more checkboxes to show where the equipment will be used in the middle of the supply chain. Next, there is a table where applicants should indicate the types of agricultural food products that will be processed with the requested equipment. For the current business operations question, describe the applicant organization's current business operations, including services being offered in the geographic focus area of the proposed project. Next, in the text box provided, describe the impact the requested equipment will have on local and regional producers, market outlets, and any others. Finally, estimate a total number of local and regional producers that will be impacted by the requested equipment. Next on the application forms page, you will find the performance measures form. This is where you will enter information relating to the performance measures the project will address. Using the format provided within the application, provide expected numbers based on the project's scope of work. Input 0 for each performance measure that is not applicable to the specific project. Each proposal must select at least one performance measure. Note that all selected performance measures must be tracked, measured, and reported upon during the grant duration. So, take care to create realistic estimates and select only the performance measure or measures that best suit your proposal. Now, let's move on to the budget, which also must be submitted in Amplifund. Here are a few tips for applicants to consider as they prepare their budget. Applicants should ensure that all of the requested costs are allowable. If the project includes a substantial amount of unallowable costs, the proposal may be disqualified. It is strongly encouraged that infrastructure grant applicants reference the allowable and unallowable costs and activities table in the request for proposals when completing their budgets. Applicants should ensure that all costs are justified and directly support the project objectives. Reviewers will want to know why this item is being requested and how it relates to the project activities. Check that cost estimates are reasonable and realistic. Please remember to provide sufficient detail for all requested costs. Reviewers should understand that costs are reasonable and justified and how the costs requested are necessary to complete the project's goals. Double check all budget totals to make sure they are correct. This attention to detail shows the care and time that was taken in preparing the budget. Also, please start your applications early and don't wait until the day applications are due to start your budget. Finally, remember that the information presented today is an overview. More detail can always be found in the Request for Proposals or RFP. The budget section for equipment-only grants is quite simple. The only costs allowable for this type of grant are special purpose equipment costs. So there is only one section to complete. Estimate the total cost to purchase the requested equipment. Special purpose equipment includes canners, hulling processors, reverse osmosis systems, egg packing machines, flotation tanks, roasters, other processing equipment, packing and labeling equipment, delivery vehicles, and similar. Be sure to describe how the requested equipment will be used to achieve the objectives and outcomes of the proposed project. Please note that applicants must submit documentation to substantiate the costs of each piece of equipment, which can include contracts, catalog pricing, binding quotes provided by licensed commercial entities, or similar. The budget for infrastructure grants is more complex as many types of costs are allowable under this grant track. They are listed here and we will cover each in more detail presently. The first category is Category A, Personnel. This is where the applicant will list the total estimated cost of salary and wages for time spent working on the project by employees of the applicant organization. In the description box, please list the title of each employee as well as the amount of time they will be spending working on the project. For hourly employees, applicants just need to report the number of hours worked. For salaried employees, applicants should use a percentage full-time equivalent. Please note that a year-by-year breakdown is not required, only the total amount requested for each. Salary and hourly requests should follow the U.S. General Schedule pay scale for the locality in which the employee will be working. Note that additional justification is required for employees or contractors whose salaries exceed the GS-15 Step 10 rate of pay. Finally, be sure to include a basic overview of the tasks or activities that each employee will take part in or oversee in support of the project's goals. A good rule of thumb is that the more an individual is working on the project, the more description is required to justify the cost. Category B is fringe benefits. Fringe benefits include benefits like paid leave, health insurance, pensions, and unemployment, and are calculated as a percentage of an employee's salary. In the amount requested box, applicants should list the total estimated fringe benefits cost for employees of the organization, determined in accordance with the applicant's established fringe benefits policy. Please be sure to provide the approximate fringe benefit rate and the types of benefits included. Category C is travel. Under amount requested, please list the total estimated cost for all individuals except contractual personnel. When preparing your travel cost estimate, there are two options. If your organization has a formal travel policy, you may use this policy. If your organization has no formal travel policy, you must use the General Service Administration or GSA locality maximums. Please note that all for-profit applicants must use the GSA locality maximums. These can be found on the GSA website, www.gsa.gov. A link is provided in the RFP. Please note that per diem rates for the first and last days of travel are not the same rates as full travel days. For airfare, applicants must use the lowest reasonable commercial airfares. In the description box, describe why the travel is needed to accomplish the project objectives and provide a breakdown of costs. Again, a reviewer should be able to determine that all requested costs are reasonable, justified, and used to support the stated goals and objectives of the project. Category D is special purpose equipment. This is where applicants will list the cost to purchase or rent any equipment needed for their project. To be considered equipment, an item must cost $5,000 per unit or more and be tangible, non-expendable, and have a useful life of more than 1 year. Special purpose equipment may be used only for research, medical, scientific, or other technical activities. General purpose equipment is not limited to these activities. Note that RFSI funds can be used to rent or purchase special purpose equipment, but may be used only to rent general purpose equipment. Again, RFSI funds cannot be used to purchase general purpose equipment. In the description box, please list the name of the item to be purchased, its cost, and how it will support the goals of the project. Again, remember to provide sufficient detail that a reviewer will be able to determine the purchase or rental cost is reasonable, justified, and in support of the project's goals and activities. Applicants should submit documentation to substantiate the costs of each piece of equipment, which can include contracts, catalog pricing, binding quotes provided by licensed commercial entities, or similar. Category E is supplies. Enter the total estimated cost for supplies in the amount requested box. Supplies refer to items that cost less than $5,000 per unit and are used exclusively for the objectives of the project. It is important that you do not include indirect costs in this category. Some examples of indirect costs include general use office supplies, facilities costs, and administrative costs. In the description box, please list the types of supplies the project anticipates purchasing and provide a breakdown of costs. Category F is for the project's estimated construction costs. Here, applicants will estimate the total cost of construction necessary to the project. Describe costs including administrative and legal expenses, structures, relocation expenses and payments, architectural and engineering fees, project inspection fees, site work, demolition and removal, construction, and miscellaneous expenses related to modernizing or expanding a new or existing facility. Be sure to describe the need for construction costs. For projects involving construction, include any design and/or construction documents. Again, remember that a reasonable reviewer should understand that all requested costs are reasonable, justified, and necessary for the project's goals. Note that if a project is selected for funding, the grantee will be required to follow all applicable federal regulations regarding the construction activities. Please refer to the RFP for more detail. Category G is for the project's estimated contractual costs. Any organization other than the applicant that will work on the project and receive grant funds is considered a contractor, excluding those covered in F construction. For the amount requested, please list the total estimated cost of any work to be performed by organizations other than the applicant. Typical costs under contractual include consultants or project cooperators from other organizations. This amount should include all the budget costs associated with each contractor, including salary, travel, supplies, the contractor's indirect costs, etc. In the description box, list the names of the contractors, if known, and the types of services they will provide in support of project goals. Be sure to include whether the contractor has an hourly or flat rate fee structure. Please note that contractors are subject to the same limitations and restrictions as applicants, including those related to indirect costs. Include a justification for why contractual or consultant services will be used to meet the project's outcomes and objectives. Very importantly, note that RFSI requires a breakdown of costs for contractual requests greater than $10,000 per contractual entity. This means that if you will be paying one organization more than $10,000 in contractor or consultant fees, you are required to provide a detailed description describing what those costs will pay for and why they are reasonable and necessary. Note that the Office of Management and Budget has developed guidelines for determining appropriate rates for contractors. Generally, additional justification is required for contractors with an hourly rate of pay that exceeds the salary of a General Schedule or GS 15 Step 10 federal employee in the area where work will be performed. Category H is for other costs. For the amount requested, provide the estimated total of all other project costs broken down into cost per unit. Examples of costs that should be listed under Other include costs associated with meetings and conferences, excluding travel, communications, rental expenses, advertisements, publication costs, data collection, etc. Note that if the budget includes meals other than those associated with travel, additional justification is required to support that these are not unallowable entertainment costs. Again, remember that you should demonstrate costs are reasonable, justified, and necessary in the description box. Category I is where applicants will indicate the amount of indirect costs requested for their project. Remember that the indirect costs are the facilities, depreciation, and administrative costs that cannot easily be tied directly to the activities of the grant. If an applicant has a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement or NICRA, it is required to use this amount for indirect costs, and a copy of the NICRA must be submitted with the application. Otherwise, applicants may elect to charge a de minimis rate of 10% of modified total direct costs. Again, for more detailed information, please refer to the RFP. For this budget category, no description is required. The total amount will be added up automatically, and the amount requested for budget categories A through I should match the award requested on the project information page. Remember, infrastructure grants have a minimum request of $100,000 and a maximum request of $3 million, excluding the matching funds requirement. Equipment-only grants can request the actual cost of equipment between $10,000 and $100,000. No description is required in this section. Finally, there are several resources and links available on the RFSI website to help you as you are completing your proposal. These include the Request for Proposals, which has an allowable and unallowable costs and activities table for infrastructure grants. CDFA has also prepared a Frequently Asked Questions, or FAQ document. The website is also where we will post our ongoing Q&A, of which we will complete 5 rounds throughout the application period. Finally, you can find links to our webinars and recordings of the webinars, as well as links to our weekly RFSI office hours on the website. That concludes the proposal presentation. We will do another question and answer session now. Feel free to continue sending in your questions.